I'm hitting the peach vape. Peach fuzz. It's gonna help me grow my luscious locks.
In the cereal milk vape. Does
What?
it tastes like cereal milk?
Does it?
And yeah, it's pretty good.
Like what kind of? Hold on. That's not all cereal milk is equal. Like which one is this? Is this Lucky Charms? Is this Frosted Flakes, which you unfortunately enjoy?
2% or whole milk?
I think this is the if you put a bunch of like Captain Crunch into whole milk, and then you put that outside of your house, and you describe the flavor into a cannabinoid distillate, that's about where you're at.
Oh no, that's I do think we should do like a spirit catalog of all the cereal mascots at some point as like a fun thing. Like I want to know like Toucan Sam, Captain Crunch, Count. What's the Chocula? All the kings. Yeah.
DKMU moment.
Yes, it would be a DKMU moment. It would also just be like a what was that one like line about like Americans not really having heroes, only superheroes? Like I would love to just do like a well fuck it chaos magic of cereal mascots.
Real chaos magic of the American civic religion. My thesis.
I'm down. I also just think that I've seen so because Key has really got me into like coffee culture, even though I'm not a coffee drinker. Like, and now I'm like, I know what I now know what all these different like filters and ways of pouring coffee and like the reason why you'd want to use certain things. Like having seen you like hand grind beans over and over and over again and explain the courses of texture, why it has to be a ceramic blade, not a stainless steel blade. Now that I know these things, I can't help but think of all the different like cold foams you've introduced me to, including like the cereal milk ones.
Yeah, totally. We got a Flavor Max.
Yeah. What do you have a favorite cold foam?
Ooh, I like a good salted cold foam sometimes.
I do think any bubble tea is measurably improved by a cheesy salt cloud thing on the top.
Exactly, yeah. A bit of a departure from the coffee because in the specialty world, I'm like, just give me that stuff.
Just black.
I'm ready for the cake pop pairing with the foam.
Oh yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's been the raccoon cake pop recently.
I think we hung out recently, and I think I consumed one raccoon cake pop a day because you kept bringing them to me, and I couldn't get anyone to share them with me because everyone is like gluten or dairy free. Okay, but like for me, I like a lavender cold foam.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, or like a nice like pumpkin one, but like the lavender one. Back when the company that should not be named was doing lavender cold foam on matcha, that was nice.
Shout out to a certain coffee roasting company that I used to frequent, where they had a drink called the Sweet Honey Bee. That was a lavender infused honey syrup latte.
Ooh.
And I'm like, yeah. That was the good shit right there.
Okay, Jove, what cold foam are we doing? And give us an asteroid pairing.
Ooh. You know, that lavender cold foam, which I think, Sfinga, you actually introduced me to.
The first time we ever met in person.
First time we ever met. You know, I think that would probably go pretty well with Juno. I don't know. Lavender for me is a big wedding sort of smell, wedding flavor. Maybe too much time being out here in Utah, but I could see those two.
Oh yeah. Having been to a lavender farm recently, we're doing like a little lavender release at some point in the near future. It's remarkably Jovian in that way. One thing that like struck me was I would love to do, this is complete non sequitur, but I would really love to do like a full on like Juno shrine that is like flanked with bouquets of lavender. That's a shrine hanging over there, arranged in the form of a peacock. So you would just have like bushels of it as a peacock tail. Because I used to do origami peacocks with my good friends together on like blue paper that we would give to Juno.
Yeah.
And like write petitions into. Because like she was really good at origami and could like just make it really quickly. And I feel like that like interwoven with lavender bushels would be so cool.
Oh, that'd be great. I know there's Japanese paper that has lavender kind of woven into it too.
Yes, and I use a dragon's blood infused like a self-burning paper for sigils sometimes.
Really cool.
Be not alarmed at the frightful house which you may hear. It's Sfinga and Bonatti or Be Nice. that one's all Jove. That's not us. Like we were trying to figure one out, and like we were like, oh, Bonatti, like Guido Bonatti, like, and I was like, well, Key can definitely find a midpoint of anything, like concepts, vape flavors, infused like coffee flavor, cold foam, whipped nitrous oxide, whatever. You could find the planetary pairing and the cake pop pairing to any galaxy gas. I believe that.
The fucking galaxy gas. Oh my god.
Can't do astrology without it.
Can't do astrology without it. Can't enter a meditative state these days.
Yeah.
And in the age of this much overstimulation without it.
They're doing a little too much.
What's a little brain cell sacrifice to the gods? between friends.
Oh man. I'm just thinking about they're putting something in the gas, man. It's different.
It's different, it moves different.
I'm moving different.
It summons Jinn differently.
Planetary pairing for galaxy gas.
It's possible. It leaves room for the asteroids. We'll get into that in a second. Controversial subject, and yet very. I'm excited to go into it. But before we do, remember to check us out at patreon.com/The Frightful House. We have a bonus episode curated every month by and just for our patrons, a Discord server. We got an almanac. We got a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text or a movie of your choosing. We got show notes for every episode, a whole tier of monthly group spell work from us on your behalf every month. So check it out. And remember to give us a like, rating, review on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you might be listening to us. It helps us fight the demiurgos of the algorithm, keeps us afloat. We recently had a bit of a kerfuffle with one of our podcast hosts that said like randomly recommending like a completely different podcast on our feed, and I had to like go into it to try and like remove it. But it was really funny because I was like, you kind of had to be there because you're trying to learn about like magic and spirits, and instead our podcast feed is like learn about perimenopause. And honestly, kind of slay. Like in one, I have two earbuds in, right? One of them is playing the Bible in Chinese at ×2 speed, and the other one is playing the Menopause Bible.
Yeah.
A grimoire in and of itself.
A grimoire in and of itself. So true. And check out our services. Key offers personalized coaching and magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings, custom talismans, oils, tools. He'll prescribe you a flavor of galaxy gas. No,
it's always blue raspberry.
No, I cannot. Not with your electric Arctic blue piss, whatever, carbohydrate infused. Like, oh, it's 30 grams of protein every time I sip this fucking lightning blue urine thing. Fucking. Whatever. It's not even blue raspberry. It's just the color blue.
Some other shit.
It's yellow 40. What is it like? Yeah. No. But he will. But you could talk to him, and he'll give you an offering of your choice, and a K-pop prescription. Not K-pop because he still won't watch K-pop Demon Hunters with me.
I like the cat that knocks things over.
That's because it's you. No, but like no, you watch it with me soon. I insist.
Mhm.
Everyone, peer pressure. But cake pops from Starbucks. And then also I offer something. I offer Fabomancy readings. Come get your beans read.
Go do it. Highly recommend.
It's so good.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And Salt's books are closed, but keep an eye out for the almanac on the Patreon. And lastly, hit us up on social media. I'm at Dragon Cunning, occasionally cunning, often not.
Always cunning.
This is it's Schrodinger's cunning. Well, what is the full card? Is it upright? Is it reversed? Who's to know? Salt is at saltcnc, and Key is at barnowl.key. And please welcome Jove Spucchi. Spooky scary skeletons.
We got spooks.
No Max Turner posting today. That's for the sequel of this episode. When Jove comes back and it's just like, you thought you were gonna get occult advice. This is only egoism now.
The ego is massive.
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive.
That's so stupid. I love it. A very good friend, very long-standing ally in the cyberspace world of juju and astrology and Saint Expedite veneration through increasingly more literally esoteric means. And just a shining light in the world of the literal things that are hidden, and making them far more accessible and able to resonate really with all of us. Jove is not just a great friend, but a tremendously important thinker in the scene. I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you, Sfinga. It's so much fun to be here. We've been talking about this for forever, and I'm glad we finally got the chance to do it.
Yeah, I think it's been like a year since we started planning.
Yeah.
having you on.
Yeah.
But people can find you in plenty of places, right? So I'm going to have this in the show notes and also in the episode description, but it's spooky.com, SPUCCHI.com. Same for Instagram, it's spooky. And you are the host of the Occulted podcast as well, which is coming out of hibernation, I heard.
It is going to start launching season 2 quite shortly, and hoping to have y'all on too.
Oh, absolutely. What topics would you have us divulge?
Ooh. Every time we all get talking about tech magic and that whole world, it's my favorite. So I'd love to have y'all on to maybe talk about that and just what y'all have seen. I loved the DKMU episode, and I think there's a lot of overlap in some of the things that I do and some of the things y'all do practice and write about.
Awesome. That was a Key special, and it was honestly one of my favorites.
Same.
Yeah, it was really great. So every month we get someone being like, DKMU part 2, can we get the next wheel? Can we get the Hexorian movement? There's a lot of hunger for that, because I think no one was quite ready to find out that our intrepid treasure hunting, Faustian, pact binding, lock picking, barn owl witch of the night got his start with Ellis.
Yeah. All goes back to the Lady of the Node.
Yes, node thyself.
Yeah, literally.
New merch idea: node thyself with Rahu and Keru.
The big LS across the back.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That actually goes kind of hard. I'm gonna play with that.
Yes. So, okay, we'll be definitely going to do that. And you also have one of my favorite projects to come out in the last calendar year and really just decade, which is Hody Partner. People might have seen this because we were promoting it pretty heavily in the server, but Hody Partner is a virtual Expedite shrine where you can not only pray to Expedite, thank him for things, give him virtual offerings in the manner that deeply, I believe, is not only evocative of the kind of joy of Saint Expedite and the kind of cheekiness that comes with him being like, yes, I'm a saint. Yes, you should call me handsome. in public. But also part of like the aesthetics that you capture on that website is literally one of my favorite things ever. I remember being like a kid looking up like occult websites that were on Angel Fire and GeoCities or whatever like that, and they would have the spinning pentagrams, and I would just be entranced. And the fact that you have like a beautiful expedite like with flan looking like almost like a pound cake surrounding him in carnations, and he's got a fucking cowboy hat spinning slowly in the center of this like nice leather reclining chair texture in the back.
Oh my god, yeah.
I showed this to my mother and she was like overjoyed.
So good.
Yeah,
I had
definitely inspired by the old web of like crystal links. I was on a lot as a kid, and just that like, sort of
spells of magic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you guys remember that site that was like all of the elemental mancies, and then it would give exercises where it's like make a cyball and then invoke into it cold and then throw it at your thermostat?
I did that and it went down. I know it went from 23 Celsius to 21.
I remember printing those sites out.
Oh yes,
my own little secret book.
Literally, I had a binder. I remember it was like a lavender purple, which is my favorite color. Like just a binder that I was just putting all of them in, and I was printing them off. My mom would come in and see me just do my breathing exercises, and she'd be just like, whatever, you know. But yes, I showed her the website because she was like, oh, I can use this because when she had one of her petitions fulfilled, and she gave me the petition, she's like, please give us your expedite shrine. I was like, no, you come with me. We pray together, and we did the whole thing. And it worked. She baked him a pound cake herself, and then she wanted to like thank him in public. So she ended up making a Reddit account and went on r/Saint-Expedite to do it. And she was like, "I wish I didn't have to do it on the worst website on the world." And so this is going to be so much better.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun to do, and you know, in my own expedite practice, he was sort of demanding a little more public attention and recognition. So I definitely kind of syncretize expedite and Mercury to some degree in my practice, and the technology angle just really came through. I love the idea of virtual altars, and now that you can do a little bit more 3D, even on like a mobile device, I think it just kind of adds quite literally a whole new dimension to these sorts of spaces.
Mm-hmm. I also just really like that if you send in a petition, like people have sent in, like, please send expedite, help me do this thing. Like you can, and it works. You can have like the answered stamp on it.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
You know, wanted to have it so you can show off a little bit.
As he should. I love that was the inspiration, and like there's like offerings you can give him as well through the website. Yeah,
so we've got crow feathers, red candles, red carnations, a glass of water, the things I typically put on my altar.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure I could probably bribe him with like, oh, look at all these virtual glasses of water I'm sending you. Imagine like if I gave you those in real life, you know?
Yeah.
No, but I think a really beautiful part of this too is that you have a FAQ where you talk about like, what is the theology of digital offerings? Like, what is the whole point of this website? Like, what is the money going to? Like, what exactly is Saint Expedite's kind of deal? Like, why are you making this for him? And I love that so much. He's such an important saint, not just for like getting things done quickly, but also I do believe that like if there is a saint of AI, like part of that is gonna be him for sure. In terms of like what is it to get an immediate response that is accrued through searching existing data. And also, what is the confusion of that start when it starts to feed itself the same data and create that kind of like loop? I think there's a part of like how Saint Expedite as like a mimetic device and also a spirit has kind of evolved in his practice that comes into play.
And AI was a big part of making this site. The offerings started as AI generated images and then became AI generated 3D models. I did all sorts of stuff with my computer, Saint Expedite statue, and Key's wonderful Saint Expedite oil to sort of flavor the AI, give it a bit of a thrust in a certain direction. And so that's kind of an ongoing experiment of how can we sort of take these saints, spirits, whatnot, that seem to have some sympathies with AI, and how do they impact each other and affect each other?
Mm-hmm.
Totally, yeah. I think there's a lot of really fruitful exploration there to be used as almost an AI psychopomp on like the rhizonic web of these things going out. Like there was this really cool interview with Lauren Balick recently talking about how like certain forms of, like, specifically in her context, Jewish mysticism and esoteric readings of the Talmud are mimicking these, rhizomic branching lines of thought, and without the anchoring to pull people back and out and be able to integrate those kind of unmoored connections between point A and point B somewhere in the distance, that people can go a little off the deep end with that. So I think there's some exploration there, as always, with the forces that bring people back in a moment's notice.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that the kind of immediate kind of reflex of like being like anti looking at AI and what that could be in a magical context is just like, it's silly because like there was that too with like the notion of like, oh, we can never incorporate technology. We can never read like a ritual off of like a screen. It has to be written by hand. I do believe there's a great amount of the spirits are watching that how you choose to make effort, right? So like if you are making that effort physically in certain ways, like of course they will value that, but they also value like, it's not like the internet or like just in general technology doesn't literally permeate this world, right? It's not like it doesn't literally become a energetic field that spirits absolutely can and frankly do interact with. So I think that's another part of it too, is just making sure that we're aware of like, if it's out there, there's a spirit that's going to be able to manipulate it. And I think Key, when you and I first met, you were really getting into like working with a spirit box, right? Like with a what was that called again? If you don't remember.
Yeah, the spirit box. Because of my undying love of EVP and like ghost hunter shit when I was younger. Playing around with that and then actually saying, okay, if people think this is a device that can communicate with spirits, I'm going to call my spirits into the room and see what it does, and just play around with it in that way. And I was working in radio at the time and had a bunch of fun shit to play around with. Had some interaction with a few people at the time who were doing similar tech experimentation, and in correspondence with people doing the same a bit more privately. But it always ended up being fun. The kind of back to elder tech currently. Which amazing line of applied eschatology. But yeah, writing a lot about robotic divination, generative art, folklore of the future and stuff like that. Who was actually on the Folk Around and Find Out panel at this year's Salem Witchcraft Folklore Festival. So go check that out.
Yeah, I mean, we'll save some of like that discussion on like tech and magic when we come on to your part of the podcast world. But I do think it's just important to highlight for Howdy Partner, because it is something that I now use when thinking an expedite. It is something that I now like very much see as an extension of that kind of, as you were saying, Key, like that kind of rhizomic capacity of that science to just like go around and like syncretize with different beings and just really have that impetus, like what is it to do something now, including a project? What is it to I mean, you, Jove, you pulled that together very quickly. That was pretty crazy. And I was curious to hear before we get into some of the astro stuff, like you said you use Key's oils of Sin Expedite. Like how do you find is like the most effective way to like bridge like basically like workings of that nature, where you're like, what are you applying the oil to, for example? Like what are you like, I know many folks, myself included, who will slap like a pentacle onto the back of their computer, or will keep certain pentacles of Solomon by their printer to keep them running well, or will have like seals and sigils. Like the lock screen, like when you trace the little shape, that's a sigil that I already forgot what it's supposed to be ages ago. Before I ended up changing it to a different passcode. But like for a long time, it was a particular pattern that I traded myself to forget, which, if you know me, isn't easy. But I did manage to forget it so that I could just have it be unconscious, like whatever I was doing. And I'm always been really interested in like calculators. Like I'm excited about the idea of like had I the time, I would totally do like a website kind of like Howdy Partner, where it was just like the hygromantia hours and days. where we would go into like, what are you in right now? Who is the angel that rules that hour? And who is the demon that suppresses? And so on. Like, how do you kind of like, what are you actively doing on the physical side of thing? And not to make it a dichotomy of it, but like, and then what are you doing when it comes to like, how is that boosting your ability to code and your ability to receive inspiration while doing so?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite areas to experiment with. So it's definitely an ongoing exploration. But some of the things I've done, loading images or 3D scans or petitions to Saint Expedite into working memory in a computer, kind of priming it with these symbols and objects that have that sympathy to Expedite or any other spirit. I will physically take my laptop and move it through the smoke of incense that I'm actively burning on Saint Expedite's altar. And with that, I try to use local AI models. The idea that there is some physicality of where these models are stored, where these things are running in memory, being affected by the smoke in one way or another, or the field, if you will.
That's freaking awesome. I love it so much. I think I recently got a book in by George Zarkadakis called In Our Own Image, which is about artificial intelligence. And something that it really struck me was they were kind of going through, and this is going to be a very glib paraphrase, excuse me, but like they were kind of going through the idea that like back when like our understanding of the divine will mirror the current, like what is the current like highest level of technological progress. So like when we had this idea of like, oh, the divine is like this workman, this demiurge that creates like this kind of clockwork like mechanisms of the world, and it's all very mechanistical. That's representing a particular rise in technology. When the divine was understood as kind of like what a custodian of agriculture, like when the gods were seen as like primarily dealing with agricultural needs and responding to those kind of ecosystem problems surrounding that farming and surrounding irrigation and so on. Like that's kind of like they were seen as creating men, as these kind of like essentially clay born images of themselves that then go out and do these things and so on. But they're also kind of like indentured servants because that's a huge part of the economy and so on. And then like now a lot of times we talk about like, especially when like the tech bros of the world like talk about like God, or to think about like what that is, it's like, oh, it's simulation, it's like it's kind of like a big program and so on and so forth, right? So I think that one of the things that, yes, like that's interesting to observe on like a sociological level, but I think there's a magical power in being like, okay, well, if that's what's possible right now, then what are the spirits that are patroning that, and how are they expressing themselves through that, and how can we use it?
Absolutely. And I think kind of the oracular nature of how AI is perceived by most people is really interesting too. I use AI for a couple different divination experiments and practices that I do, some that are image-based and some that are text-based. And I find that it does have an interesting oracular ability, if you will. And the idea that you can kind of set a system prompt that kind of is the script for how an LLM will role play is really fun. So in coding Hody Partner, actually having the AI take the position of Saint Expedite and seeing if that could make things go more quickly. In general, it worked.
Amazing. And the aesthetic is the bomb.
GeoCities, not to be confused with cities on other planets of the different spheres.
Oh my god!
Not to Calvino's invisible cities, but let's talk about some invisible cities.
The geomancy cities. Well, are there any other projects on the horizon for you then?
Yeah, continuing with the technological thread and moving more into the astrological, I'm starting to build out the sort of framework for my own astrological tools. Very much a work in progress right now, but astrotechny.com is where it'll live. I work a lot with circumambulations, also with the asteroids a lot too. And I find that the software for those things is really either inaccessible or doesn't work very well or isn't really suited for someone working with them practically. So I'm kind of starting to build out tools that help me in my practice as I prepare charts for people and scrying those things. How can I pull up the asteroids, display them in certain ways that will help me in that scrying process?
Beautiful. Well, I guess so we're going to pivot a little bit into astrology. Maybe you can tell us a bit about what your background is astrological, like where your training comes from and kind of what are your preferred methods or like kind of in terms of like what is the scope of your tools kit when it comes to astro stuff?
Yeah. So about 5 years ago is when I really started seriously studying astrology. I mentored with Larry Arrington, who's a student of Demetra George, and over pandemic we were meeting virtually to go through classical Hellenistic texts. And since then, I've taken a lot of courses from Demetra George and have gone through Valens and Dorotheus and any of the more original texts I can get my hands on. So I very much work in the Hellenistic traditional mode, then also bring in some of the psychological, more modern approach, very much so in the asteroids. So I work astromagically, for sure, with planetary ritual that I have done for about the last 5 years. My entry point to astrology was definitely in the sort of praxis mode, very spirit driven and spirit based, and building those relationships with the planets and the sort of narratives and archetypes that come with them as well. And so that kind of made a natural transition into the asteroids, which represent a lot of the more feminine archetype and stories that are sometimes left out of the major planets.
Mm-hmm. I go back to a reading you gave me, which was just on my Saturn return, because he is an Aries.
Yes.
Yeah, for now. Well, he'll be back in Aries very shortly as well, shortly after. I think that was really illuminating to me because one, you speak a language that I adore, which is Freudian. Lacan and all that stuff. Like I really love that we can kind of vibe on that. But also just that understanding of grounding yourself, like what are the perfectioners and how can you prepare for them? Like how can you time sorcery you want to do with each of them as if it's like essentially like a sphere that inhabit.
Yes.
That you can continue with. Like what are the kind of mythic archetypes as well as like individual spirits that are coming forward and help like advocating like this is the time that we accomplish this work together. Is just tremendously important. And so like I remember people ask like, oh, like who is an astrologer that you, since like, since books are closed, like who would you recommend? I often point people to you because that was a deeply illuminating reading. And you do a great job of not pushing away the importance of something being in detriment or something being in fall. But you do still find like, if you're talking to a witch, you're going to find a way to be like, well, here's what you can be. Like if this is,
exactly.
I remember you telling me like if a fall is a region that is under-resourced, that may not mean the same thing for a malefic. That also may not mean the same thing for somebody who can work with spirits that actually kind of thrive in that environment of competition and of like being like, oh, that's all we have right now. Well, here's what we'll do about it.
Right. And I very much kind of like the idea of containers for energy in astrology, or this is very much sacrilegious to the more traditional take on things, which believe that the fate is sort of set in the stars and that we can't change those things. But I do think that we, as witches, as magicians in particular, can create containers for these energies, right? If there's something malefic or negative that's impacting the chart, what can you do to make a container for that? What can you do to sort of direct that in a way that you can manage? You might not be able to get rid of it. There are some remediation tools and things like that, but how do you exhibit your agency as much as possible towards putting that energy of that planet or that asteroid or sign or whatever into something that works for you?
Yeah, it was hugely helpful. Even just the understandings of like what is it to be you do full like natal chart readings, you do also like slices of particular timelines, you also do electional stuff. Like I really appreciated that for Saturn return stuff you were talking about like, okay, if you're released from the strictures of birth and you now enter a new one that is less handed down to you from ancestry and society, but more one that you can choose. Isn't that like a supremely witchy time? Isn't that one all for like testing? Like you've had rules, you've broken rules. Now, what do you want to reforge? Something like that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a huge sign of initiation. It's a huge sign of just like a great time to restructure things. Because I do feel like a lot of I was initially like turned on to the idea of like Mercury retrograde remediation through working with Hermes Cathonos a long time ago.
Yes, yeah.
And like I love the idea of like what if you apply that notion to everything for yourself, like and having that ability to kind of like know that like if you're a serpent winding, witchy person, like you part of this journey of like exploring astrology and exploring like one's birth chart. I think you do a great job of like pointing out it could be so much more than just kind of that myopic like navel gazing of tell me more about my personality, like tell me more about who I really am inside. It's just like tell me more about me and more into like what are some strategies and sorceress techniques and timings for certain offerings and for certain things that can come into play that will help someone move through not just like difficult periods, but like transitions with like the most amount of turbulent kind of backing.
Yeah. As a witch magician, I'm always looking for ways I can increase my scope of agency. And knowing where the planets are and what they're doing and what that means to me is one of the most important ways you can do that. I would say no matter what kind of magic you're doing, at least look where the moon is, at least look where it's affecting your natal chart because it'll boost everything.
There's a reason speaking of pentacles, right? There's a reason it's basically you're just looking at the moon and you're looking at what occasionally if it says something like, okay, the 4th of Jupiter needs Jupiter to be in Cancer. But like other than that, it's very much like, no, these have their own divine agencies. And so do we. So like but they're nevertheless affected. And I think that's something that's important to consider, right? Like my planetary work has been outside of my native tradition has been very interested in playing with the rules and boundaries of ceremonial magic because like once I've gone through the effort to summon like a natal genius, for example, or a spirit that belongs to a particular pentacle, or just like something from the Picatrix, it's like, well, now I'm curious as to like how does your scope of work affect the current world that we're in? Like if I had to rewrite all of those descriptions of like the mastery of that particular spirit or that particular planet over the sphere, what would I update it with?
So one of the things that we've done a lot of work on, all three of us, like stretching the poetic application of all of these things in the texts. Like our famed example of the Mercury Pentacles, bringing things contrary to nature for gotcha game and gambling.
And real. I love using the 2nd of Mercury for gotcha gambling bullshit, pulling my 5-star whatever item in Genshin Impact because I think like in my mind when you hear like things contrary to their nature, that can mean a lot. But it can also like an expensive thing for cheap and a rare thing but found commonly. It's really increased my chances, and that's one of those things I like about that kind of magic is you can so easily measure it. You can literally run a system table, and you can be like, okay, here's all the times that I've done it. This is the actual percentage point of what I should be getting it, and here's a noticeable uptick that whenever I do this, it does increase.
Go full Rhine research mode. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Well, you wrote a beautiful post recently about scrying the natal chart. And I will link it in the notes as well. Can you, without, I guess, people should read it, but like, could you give us some of the high notes of that and like what that actually means for you in combining both like Hellenistic astrology and very traditional modes of interpretation with more modern considerations?
For sure. After a bunch of years of giving readings and kind of stepping away from the astrological world for a minute, I realized that my approach was a little bit different. For me, astrology is really kind of based on magical first principles, whether they're sympathies or spirit relationships. And I do feel like the technical knowledge and learning is deeply important to respect the tradition and the lineage. With that, though, the way in which I'm reading, I can't separate from years of working with these planets and the relationships that I have with them and how they show up for me and this kind of shared language that I feel like we have just from working together. And so scrying really feels like a better word for what's going on. And I definitely have to credit Sasha Ravich, who I mentored with for a while too, and just really helped me see that what I was doing was more like that. And I'm really, really grateful for that. Yeah, I think with scrying as well, there's just like with any kind of divination, when you're reading someone, all sorts of spirits are coming in and showing up in different ways, and mine and theirs, and even just onlookers. And it's really interesting to see how those sort of reflect and refract through a chart, where I might not understand a system that someone's in magically, but I've had certain patrons in those tradition systems come up in the chart, and it's something I can kind of see the face of or see the outline of. And it's really interesting to see how even the stars reflect some of those things, whether they're, ancestral or pacts that were made. As above, so below.
I love that. It's really beautiful. And I love also that in the article you mentioned, like you might, for example, print the client's chart off and move it through the incense smoke and light like incense on that planet's altar if it's that planetary day and hour of the chart ruler. And scrying the chart and like looking at like even like making notes in the ink of the chart ruler. I think that's such a beautiful approach. We've talked a little bit on the show before about recently we talked about in gathering materia redux. We were like, what are some considerations for timing beyond like when you gather something? Like it could be when you move the money into your bank account and timing it with a particular hour. It could be when you actually pay for something. It could be when you end up someone ships something to you. Like that could be a consideration too. It could be when you decide to open the package. Like that sounds maybe like a little bit like overboard, but like if part of the work is timing things, like that could be a fun way to actually just kind of build on a crescendo of energy with spirits. I really do believe that magic has a logic, but it's not the logic of science, it's the logic of poetry, which is one of the reasons why we're not going to succeed in being like, oh, tested real spirit manifestation consistently, just shows up every time, It's like, no, I think because on one hand, like spirits are going to be like, what the fuck should I be your little pony? Doing its tricks, And on the other hand, I do think that that kind of allegorical logic. I mean, Origin of Alexandria said it best. Let's be real. When he divides, I mean, not that I truly am a tripartite soul person, but like I do think that the notion of like reading biblical texts, and there's three ways to approach them, right? There's like a physical body one, there's an emotional spirit one, and there's this intellectual soul one. And it goes literal, it goes allegorical, and then it goes moral. And I think, and all of them being true. I think that approach to like timing, the approach to scrying, the approach to like, what is it to actually like look into the moment someone was like took their first breath in this world, and then comparing that to the person that's before you, listening to the Zoom call or like wherever you're doing the reading. I think there's a power in that can't be neglected. And even when you're jujuing someone, you could take someone's birth chart, which is one of the reasons why any astrologer I know that's like, does work for clients has a pact with the spirit to be like, that's not what I'm going to do. Like I'm using this specifically for this purpose. And that way the spirits will actually guide their ability to penetrate into those things. But if you do have one and you want to use that as material, like that's such a powerful way to go about it too, as a link.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And going back to this idea of the first breath, where in Hellenistic tradition, it's the ascendant that's more important than the sun or the moon. And that is the exact point where the horizon is pointing to the sky at the time of your birth, at that time of first breath. And for inspirited astrology, I think that idea of breath is really important. The sort of natural rhythms of the planets, I relate to breath in some ways. And I think there's this sort of beautiful poetry to the idea of giving breath to these planets and speaking to them in someone's chart, and that sort of shared breath when you're ideally giving a reading to someone in person.
I did an exercise some time ago that my spirits kind of gestured to me that would be a good idea when I was doing some planetary work and getting to know the planets in my own chart. And it was specifically in their hour and day, giving them different libations that were coded to the different planetary natures, and then imbibing them together while essentially scrying my own chart. And the idea was like, I refresh you with this libation, and who was in this place when I was born, and now I imbibe it myself and asked to perceive mystery.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I work in performance as well. I've done some work as a dramaturg. I think there's a dramaturgy to all ritual, but astro ritual in particular. And so figuring out how do we take this sort of 2D representation of something as incomprehensible as the stars and bring it into the body. I think the sort of embodied expression of those things, whether it's the consumption of materia that has resonances with the planetary energy, or wearing the colors of clothing for the planet for that day, or even sort of inhabiting the bodily archetypes of the planets, like a martial stance or a Saturnian scowl, if you will. I feel that all these things were sort of a big part of calibration with the archetypes and spirits of these planets, and that figuring out how to make them real and bring them into our everyday lives is a huge part of understanding their language.
I would love to do. It's just kind of shooting the shit. I would wonder making. Harold Roth had this really beautiful item on his website called Scryer's milk, which you could like drop with a pipette into water, and it would cloud the water and let you scry very deeply with that. I was wondering about like what planetary versions of that could look like, to be like scrying into like the portal of Venus or the portal, let's say, of Jupiter, and like what the scent would evoke, what that like clove, for example, would do for you, what like that particular like hint of apples would do for you, to get in there, and or even I think if you will allow me, I think that scrying is the ultimate Lacanian praxis.
Go on.
Well, it's also, I mean, come on, like the mirror stage, the inauthentic self, right? All of that comes into play there. But also, I think that notion of the analyst as other is something that's important for us in scrying, not just in psychoanalysis. So what's the difference? It's the mirror stage is something that you kind of have to confront in scrying, because eventually, like, the void beckons back, right? And there's a contagion that takes place when you're really scrying something. Like, there is a contagion between even reader and client. There is a contagion between the tools that you're reading with and the client. There's a contagion with your spirits and their spirits, and sometimes they create that Vesica Pisces overlap, and next thing you know, you're seeing worlds of possibilities that are not necessarily relevant to the reading, but like you can't help but have to shelve. And so I think that the beauty of astrology, which, and I'm not an astrologer, but like it's not my skill set, but it's one of those things that when I've seen you or Salt or other people that I'm close to, Sasha for sure, like go into it, it's just like, oh, you have so much information at your fingertips, and you can just keep looking. Like, there's not really an end. And there is something deeply kind of, I think, inherent to reading a chart that has to do with scrying. Whether you are in, I think any good divination has to involve some level of light trance. It's just something that we often talk about on the show, and often talk about with our godfather, Jesse Hathaway Diaz. There must be some requisite level of light trance for the divination to truly be taking information from the spirit world and then translating into your own words. And it's one of the reasons you can get your chart scribed by many people, right? You can be like, you'll always get a different take on it, even if the information is largely the same. And that's part of what you're wanting. Like, you want that person's individual skill set and history to come in and be the translator of this moment. But as a result, I think that something that you put very well in your article is that, like, you mentioned this is an intentional technique, but you also hint that this is kind of inevitable.
I really like what you're saying about this idea of countertransference and transference, where when interacting with the other, inevitably some parts get swapped. There's lasting influence on both parties. And that's really where it goes to shared language for me, in the sense that, my relationship with the planets is what kind of acts as the lens in which I can see the stars and sort of intuit and understand kind of what they mean and what they're saying. And I love to get readings from as many different astrologers as possible, because I do think we all have those very specific relationships and pick up on different things. And it's such an endless poetry of ways to interpret, right? There's the mythological aspect that I like to bring in a lot, and some folks are very much on the deeply technical and sort of numerical side of things. And there's just sort of endless means to continue to explore. And I feel like there are folks who read kind of in a purely technical way, and that's often where a lot of the navel gazing, as you put earlier, comes from, I think. But those who are kind of attached to a deeper tradition and are looking at it through a spiritual lens, those are the readings that I go back to and think about.
Mm-hmm.
With all of astrology, right, when you are developing a chart, really any chart will be a microcosmic representation in that way. But at the same time, it is, to me, I've always seen it as an inspirited art because it's inherently ephemeral. Like there is a spirit of a moment that you must capture and pin down and interrogate, working through all of these things. So the beauty of it as an art is whether or not it goes acknowledged. There is the spirit of the time, of the moment, of the instant that the query was asked, that is involved beyond just the spirits that might be helping you interpret what this spirit is saying and how it's acting and what it's doing. So just the point of that, like, inspiritedness, insolidness, I think it's fun to play with, which is always something that you've spoke on and done masterfully in the surfing of the timeline of it.
Thank you. Yeah. I do really kind of look at the sort of horary method of looking at the chart of the time the question was asked. I'm not trained in horary, but I do use that as a kind of augury. Similarly to looking for omens in nature, I think you can look to the stars and look at that moment, and through that more inspirited method, gather a lot of information, and in a way that is very poetic and abstract. And we had some fun. We were able to hang out last time, just kind of comparing different divination methods, and that's not one that I do for clients. Really, it's more something I experiment with for myself. It's sort of celestial augury, and it was really fun to just experiment with that and see, it's kind of saying some similar things. It's adding its own kind of perspective. And yeah, there's a lot of fun to experiment with y'all.
Absolutely. Something that also just struck me by your mention when you were talking about this in your article about how, well, actually, like Ficino and Agrippa and Pico della Mirandola and certainly Giambattista della Porta, like all these people work with math and spirit of the heavens. And that comes to us straight from Pythagoras, yes, but really became popular through Plato's
Yes.
book 7 of the Republic, right? The divided line metaphor. The math is a stepping stone to universal concepts going from particular objects, and just kind of the ability to transition from the world of particulars to the world of universals is a deeply mathematical one. It also helps us also understand what is the dialectic of intellectual inquiry, not just through like harmonics and astronomy and different kinds of geometries and arithmetic and so on, but just like through mental exercises as a dialogue of soul. And I think that Renaissance mages who were rediscovering Plato absolutely understood this, but this has been in the core of even Christian metaphors, like in the West, for soul and for that kind of articulation. So I think that with astrology specifically, and Christian astrology is a fascinating enterprise of its own, right, in terms of the theology of things and how they're justified. But way before Lily was even just a twinkle in his mother's eye, people have been debating this for ages, including our I suppose a good friend of the podcast, Thomas Aquinas. And I think that it's important to know that when it comes to astrology and when it comes to ritual magic, right? Is like what is the purpose of all of this if not to better and deepen our cognition of the soul? What is that kind of? I'd like to hope that external mastery of this kind of theurgy necessitates an internal mastery of self-knowledge. And that's one of the reasons why psychoanalysis, astrology, divination, trance work, body work, dramaturgy, right? All these things are avenues to that. And when you can combine them in ways that are enhance the other as opposed to take away from their the kind of necessary idiosyncratic characteristics that they actually help develop, I think that we gain a really fruitful plane of interpretation.
Well said. Well said.
Well, we've mentioned asteroids a couple times, which it's interesting because I have very, very little experience with asteroids, not just as in general, but like in the praxis of like reading a chart. And you're I think the first person that really read my chart and looked at the asteroids. Now with As a Dragon Girl, they are important in other ways. But not because I'm not an astrologer. It's not something I've thought about in terms of like, oh, I should look at where Juno is in my chart. So I was very curious to hear what your thoughts are on like how you got into asteroids and what that's meant for you, and also like how do you kind of respond to the notion of like, well, it's all arbitrarily named, whatever. It's like it's not trad the way that the 7 planets are, which there are no more than 7, may I add.
Yeah, I really, once again, go back to sort of those magical first principles of sympathies and relationships, right? If the power of naming, the act of naming is magic in and of itself. When an asteroid is named after a mythical figure or even a mundane figure, I believe that there's some magical connection through sympathies to sort of the original concept or object or figure. And whether you want to think of them as just funny coincidence or synchronicity or kind of this more narrative view, I think asteroids, I mean, there are over 20,000 of them. There's so many. The ones that are named are far fewer, but I work with kind of the 4 asteroid goddesses that Demetra George writes about. And, I find that they often fill in for the sort of lack of the more feminine focused narratives or feminine driven narratives in mythology. And the classical planets, we've got Venus, Aphrodite. She's kind of the one holding it down. And Selene with the moon too. But when bringing in Juno and Ceres and, many other asteroids, I just find that you're able to get this fuller picture. And just like the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto added a whole new dimension to the way we think about astrology and generational astrology. I think the asteroids add kind of the missing components of new narratives. I think there are queer narratives in there that aren't really represented elsewhere in the sky, feminist narratives as well, and also just new stories that haven't been told yet. And so when I look at asteroids in someone's chart, I feel like it's not necessarily the main interpretation I use, but it is really helpful for sussing out details. And in an asteroid intensive I did with Demetra George, it was really interesting to see how certain names would come up for people on important points in the chart, and they would be important people in their lives. And how just by giving these bodies names, we are in some kind of relationship with them. Folks might knock the asteroids as not being traditional or not having a certain lineage, but you could say that about a lot of magic, right? And if it works, why not use it?
If it works, why not use it? Amen.
Yeah. I think that's a huge point to any of this is like when you bring in stuff from anything other than, my preferred sources, it just becomes this unnecessary point of beef because like the earlier, the analytical point, it's like, okay, does it bring something useful and are we integrating it? And I think like, in a lot of these parallels, like I know we talked about this a little bit with Maria on the show, but like these kind of novel medicines to the troubles of the current era coming in and offering kind of this, I wouldn't say solution that other things have not, but just this additive and like agglutinative yes and like here is another tool we can pick up and wield to our own novel ends, which I think is always fruitful and beautiful. And I think especially with like asteroids, comets, like kind of the body from outside coming in is part of that beautiful medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And every form of magic was new at one point or another. It was radical, it was outside the realm of the accepted or norm. But many things that were the fringe of the fringe are now the centerpieces for a lot of people's magical practices. And there's a lot of interesting work being done on the asteroids, people doing astrological research and experimenting with them magically. And for me, that's such an exciting place to be, right? When new magics are being discovered and created and co-created, you might say that's a magical edge or advantage. And, the curiosity that I have kind of can't resist.
Yeah, like the the impulse that all three of us share with new shit of something new pops up. It's like, okay, what are you and how do you give me power?
True facts.
Yep. Yep.
Key lockpicking his way into many corners of the internet.
You've never had to kick down a door in a library. You're doing something.
I watched you do it. Oh my god. I was like, that suspiciously tin, like bolt cuttered window into the cemetery fence was not there last time you took me here. You were like, don't worry about it. Here's some Florida water.
Don't you worry about what I'm doing. Worry about what you doing. Go make some money.
I'm trying.
Here's the dime. Here's the money you can make to cleanse off the gate that has been created.
Thank you. I much appreciate how you always have your kit in the trunk of the car. Because some of us will remember the plastic Ziploc bags, but will not remember the Sharpie.
Label it.
I am. I am.
To the listeners, to the
I know. Party. They are too, I swear. I trust our listeners.
Is your bag labeled?
Oh my god. No, but but you will do the time, the minute, the place, the fucking lunar mansion. You'll do it all.
Yeah. Especially so I can take that back to astrologer friends and be like, what is the temperament of this in this moment? What virtues have I unknowingly installed in this matter through my interaction with it at that time?
I actually do think that when you have like a powder that's made of like many ingredients, sometimes the reason the spirit asked for that powder is because it wants two of those things. And it can sift through it. It can pull those virtues out. Just to plug in, because this talk was excellent this year in 2025 at British Genie Symposium, our godfather, Jesse Half Ideas, did a really good talk on oils. And this is something that he mentioned. He was like, sometimes like the ingredient the spirit will ask for will be one or two out of a medley that are all mushed together in that jar that you've been storing them in. Or like if it's like 21, I don't know, cemeteries or something like that, like maybe one of them is the one the spirit's calling to, but you add all of them in there, right? When you add that pinch. I think that just going to like what you were saying, Key, is like sometimes you harvest something and like the spirit that's working the juju is just tapping into the place. But a different spirit might tap into when it was collected. And that becomes or a different spirit might be like, I noticed that my planetary like familiars, like the ones that I've gained from the intelligences of the planets from Agrippa, like they will be like, oh, I can access this because you gathered it in this way and this was happening in the sky. And like I didn't know, but I will go back and like pull up the chart for when I collected it, if I kept the date, for example, or if I just remember on my calendar when I did it, and I'll be like, oh, I see what you're talking about. Or for example, like I've had situations been like this jar of dirt for like bankers, for example, like I was called to use that for something because it was very Jovian, for sure. Like it was like Jupiterian impulse that dirt was capturing. But then they were like, we wanted in 16 parts. And that was interesting too, because they wanted it overlaid on the cameo. And so it's this, and that's not what I collected it for at all.
Right.
So it's not necessarily 16 banks. It's like it's more than that, I'm pretty sure. But they wanted it arranged in a particular way so they could kind of activate certain nodes that are on there. The way that it looked to me when I was seeing the spirits like work this is it was almost like they were playing like a celestial xylophone. Because they were like plucking particular things, right? And it was just going like boom, boom, and you could see a harmony resonating. And I was like, oh, because something that we talk about a lot in the show is like, ask your spirits how they do magic, because there'll always be a different answer. Like an animal familiar will give you a very different take than an ancestor will give you a very different take than a daimon will give you a very different take from a nature spirit of some kind. I remember one of my spirits like is always like where I wash it. Like I take it into the river and I wash it in this way. I wash it in this color, food color. Like, I wash it in this particular ink, or like I wash it in this possibility. And like they're always like, and it's really funny because that spirit is very Aquarian, actually. And so it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I they're super intellectual, super like airy about it, but they give me like almost like a scientific lowdown of what they're doing. But their metaphor is washing. even though it's not what they're literally doing in my mind's eye. And so it's great to ask that of your planetary spirits. When you were mentioning like using the ink of the planet to take notes down, or like letting instance on that planet, like in the day and hour you begin the reading, like that to me is such a creative way to like surround yourself with like additional insights, so that when you scry, you're being boosted as well by something that is actively patroning the moment in which you're doing this.
It's funny because with the ink, I feel like Mercury and Venus are the ones who respond best to that method, with the activation of the archetype of writing, and then also the sort of beautiful materiality of different planetary inks and colors and those sorts of things.
What does Saturn respond to best?
A certain level of seriousness and devotion and consistency. I can't say that I'm always the best at Saturn. I feel like what he really demands is that devotion, and often going without. And so often my offerings to Saturn will be some kind of fasting, or just meditation in silence, and trying to contemplate the emptiness of time, if you will. Also, certain degrees of structure, I think, are really important. Sometimes the Saturn work I do is very iterative, in the sense that there's a rote structure of how I do it that kind of builds upon itself. And if I goof it up, I have to start all over, kind of thing. And yeah, there's a certain meticulousness to Saturn for me.
I've often gone to like fermented foods, and offerings of things that took time to change, to alchemize, right? Or or lamps that I actually hold vigil over, not just like leaf burning in the outer rim. Fasting for sure, but also donations. I find that Saturn for me involves offering clothing and food, in charitable actions and so on. Especially, and for me, part of those kinds of donations is also feeding animals. So like I feed crows that live near me in Saturn hours, when I need certain kinds of perspectives, certain kinds of almost that Hugin and Moonin, going to the edges of the world and coming back with that knowledge, is something that I really work with a Saturnine gaze. And my primary spirit is in some ways, while definitely beyond the planets, is tremendous Saturnian in many ways, and something that I discipline, and like making an offering of knowledge and of commitment to something that I deeply resonate with. I find that I'm very good at like depriving myself of certain things. Like I'm really good at just kind of like checking out of something, but I'm also so I need to make it meaningful for me. One thing that my spirits are pointing out is like, if something comes naturally to you, put in the effort to make it extra meaningful, so that it's a real effort.
Yeah. The effort aspect feels very Saturnian to me. It's got to be skin off your back in some way.
Hello, Saint Bartholomew.
Yeah, the interplay of the fast being taking something on for Saturn, especially endeavor, conquest, the tumult of some really bizarre thing for Saturn that came up was grow a piece of food from seed that you then eat. You must succeed in this act.
What was the food?
Just plants, like vegetables at the time, was the given choice. But the idea being, you must be patient in that way, and you have to observe the fruit of just labor.
The agrarian aspects of Saturn are really interesting, and things I've grown, or things that I've sort of really labored to gather or acquire, like going and collecting grains from a bunch of different places throughout the area I'm in, and putting those on the altar, or again collecting seeds and sometimes growing them, or I had a bonsai tree that I was working with Saturn for a while, that started from a very small sapling. It was very meditative, laborious, sort of temporally costly things. He seems to revel in.
What more Saturnian art than bonsai making?
Oh my god. I love that. I mean, my experience with the Oracle of Kronos from the PGM really colored a lot of that. Like there was like a distinct before and after period for me with Saturn. Like that was a before and after moment. was just feeling like, okay, this has changed. I met Kronos in a certain extent, and that somberness has stayed with me. And I'm a person who likes to kind of like use humor a lot to like cultivate, play around with ideas, and also sometimes to deflect instinctually. And I've that reminded me of kind of some of the somber parts of me, of what it was like to feel every animal stop like making sounds, what it was like for the whole forest to be quiet, what it was like to hear those chains rattling. Like it was such a powerful manifestation. And the piglet rib that I have as the phylactery is the core of so much Saturn work that I do now. Yes, it is a restraint. It is literally a phylactery that can, prevent him from action in that sense. But it's also one that reminds the kind of double bind of like, what do you subject yourself to when you choose to interact with this force in this way. So I think that whether it's with like very ceremonial magic and kames and intelligence of spirits, very Agrippan, whether it's working with kind of the notions of conjuring some of these spirits, like the Olympic spirits, and like really playing around with those, if that's something that's up your alley, or just like in my case, like the spirits of each planet in the folkloric capacity as I know them. It's going to have overlapping symbol sets for sure. One thing that I appreciate about Serbian and Balkan folklore is that there's an emphasis on the mothers of the planets very much. So like the mother of the moon, the mother of the sun, there's a mother of Venus. And sometimes the planets are gendered all male, but then the mothers take more priority because they're the ones who boss them around. Like, what does anyone listen to? Like their mom. And so there's also this sense too, when sometimes they're gendered female, but then there's this idea that like, well, it's the domain that they actually like. They will go when you don't see them in the sky. That's when they're not home, because there's an idea of like everything lives in its own house and this kind of broader cosmology. And so like, who tends to home when the sun is not there? When it's nighttime, it's the mother of the sun. And so that's who you petition those moments. So the mother of the moon is there when the moon is dark, when it's not visible, or when it's daytime. And so like when you access these things is the opposite of when you think. So you access the mother of Mars when Mars is not visible. To the naked eye specifically.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great mythological way into the planets I hadn't really thought about. I'll have to look more into that.
Well, you know where to find me if you want more.
Yeah. The sort of astrodrama of that is really beautiful, and kind of the interesting way that speaks to power and gender roles, I think, is really potent for astrology. I think astrology often kind of takes an authoritative lens. This is capital A astrology. I don't really like to look at it that way. I think the folk traditions in particular are just potent, if not more potent, than the sort of learnedness of books. I'm always excited to hear more of those stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things too. Of like, there's the sorcery knowledge is power, and then there's the witchcraft power is power. And it's about the relationships you have with them, right? If the Greek witches of old can pull the moon down, then what can we do? But on that note, you mentioned asteroids for you kind of like fill out or like flush out a set of stories that aren't always immediately obvious. And they can presumably also illuminate that within the more traditional structures of Hellenistic astrology. What about the outer planets?
Yeah, I really like André Barbeau, who took a more statistical analysis of the mundane trends of these outer planetary cycles. They move so slowly that they kind of define themes for a generation rather than a specific person. And so while the placement is important on an individual level, especially in the way that it aspects with other things in the chart, the actual sign and degree it's in, you share with your cohort. And it really speaks to the theme of the times. And not too long ago, we sort of moved into a more air-focused age. And with that, Pluto and Aquarius in particular, we just really felt like that's when AI absolutely blew up, and sort of the groundedness of material reality. And Capricorn sort of sublimated into this amorphous, confused, gaseous sort of multiplicity of realities. So I feel like the outer planets really speak to those bigger themes. And there's the idea that the further an object is from the Earth, the sort of higher level it is in the divine hierarchy, and looking at those planets as ones that sort of define the broad strokes of the current moment, I think is really, really powerful.
Even using it as that tool, right? Since it's here is a chart with everything. Take these pieces of information that are far enough away that they're the initial filters, the first thing that the light, the ray, if you will, hits. It suddenly says, okay, read the reading in this way. Like, tell the story of X, or tell the story with this flavor, with this lens.
Yeah.
Before you even get to the story itself.
Yeah. And I think of it often as like a set or background. What is the sort of astrodrama of the inner planets set upon? I do start with the personal inner planets first, and then the outers, and then fixed stars and asteroids and those things.
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic technique. Just having seen you read for like really paring down and drilling into like how do we zoom so far out that we've gone back to the other side and zoomed in.
Yeah, I do. I think maybe think of it in a more poetic way, where there's so many different things that these archetypes can represent, especially when they're in concert with one another, that I am there not to prescribe a meaning necessarily, but to help elucidate and generally shed light upon ways that the person I'm reading for can see the way that these planetary energies and rays and symbols are occurring in their life.
Well said. I think that it decenters the diviner as like a messenger of like prescriptive or authoritative like declarations of like this is what that is, and more as an interpreter of signs, really, which is what we are. It's to say that like mm, let this be my gift to your story. Let this be my kind of signature upon how this can be seen. And that's why I think getting multiple divination systems, either within astrology, can be really helpful, because it helps illuminate different things that the individual training, individual spirits of that diviner will help elucidate.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I found too is that, kind of taking a more psychoanalytic angle, often it's what the person I'm reading for vocalizes and says that I think ends up being the most poignant. So by setting the stage and kind of explaining where all the characters are and what the backdrop is, folks often end up speaking the most important truth themselves.
And psychoanalysis also just reminds us that the body is always speaking, even if we don't listen to it. It will relay information constantly, and it's often waiting to be heard. And if you let that speak, if you listen, if you come to enter a dialogue with it, that's when it becomes easier to actually integrate. It's not to say that like that's not me. I am distant from this emotional impulse. Like this is just a passing, fleeting thing. I don't identify with it. Well, it's not about identification; it's about integration, which means some kind of acceptance that like, okay, yes, it's there, and so what? Like, what does that mean for us? What can we do to heal that or to nurture that and to make it clear that this is not shameful? And I think that a good astrological or even any divinatory insight, any kind of oracular input, is going to help elucidate the things that are there that are not so fun to look at, the patterns that we get trapped in, the way society and culture and capitalism shapes ego and shapes resource scarcity fears, that shapes competition impulses, and also just what shapes the way that things are projected onto us. And that's something that, like, I think when I was a little younger, I would get really like offended if someone kind of misinterpreted me or my intentions. I'd be like, it would hurt on a personal level. And I think as I've grown and as I've kind of studied psychoanalysis for sure, it's become a thing where I'm like, well, that actually just gives us information about me and also them and our dynamic, and points to something essential as to how do we can't ignore it or shame it away. We actually have to give it some space to exist in order to find a better way to understand each other. Like it's not just about immediately going, no, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I'm about. It's also be like, oh, what is what is being seen here, and what is the other picking up on here, and what are they also projecting, and what is happening in between all those things that can create an avenue for greater communication. And the reason I bring that up really is also for the purposes of our discussion here is I think that is essential to spirit contact.
Yes.
Because we project meaning onto the sky. We name that light over there this. We tell this asteroid that it's going to be named this mythological figure. You can adopt a highway. I think we were talking about this before we start recording. Like adopt a highway program, and that's what kind of necromancy, roto pudding magic is that? When you name something after a being or yourself, like what that naming is the core act of creation as well, and in magic. And also, I baptize you as N born on such and such day of such and such year. I name you this piece of hair that I have. Let's say I name you as the totality of you. I call on all the things that you are through this one link, or through your breath, or through your name, or through your chart. And then what do you and spirits, which we also project meanings onto, and we anthropomorphize them very much, and we tend to, because they are often invisible to us, we tend to assign a great deal of emotional impulse, judgment, meaning. We tend to assume a spirit is rejecting us if we can't hear them. And that can break our own hearts, right? Even when they're like, I'm literally right here and you're just not hearing me. And it's not your fault. Frankly, you're the one who drank too much coffee this morning. It can, but don't worry about it. Just come back in a better mood later. I think it helps us move away from a shame and unworthiness based model of spirituality, of like, I'm just not good enough to hear spirits, or I just haven't tried hard enough. And it goes into that way of like, I don't know, relaxing in the cosmic or pre-cosmic flotation sensory deprivation tank of the abyss, of the void, and being like, okay, well, like what is that light skimming across the surface of that water, and how can I meet it with dignity and with agency?
Yeah. To have a body is to be subject to its perils, right? Things that are uncomfortable can stop us from hearing our spirits, when we're angry or lonely or tired or any of these things. And I do feel like, because the body itself is also described in the chart, and we can self-reflect on our proclivities, negative or positive, and how we sort of sit in our bodies, it's really, really helpful to see those and kind of compensate for the way that we interact spiritually. The moon is what I look to first there. And I love that idea of this light skimming on top of the water and the divine essence of a thing, and how we talk to that, and how we separate ourselves from the things that keep us from seeing that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like one of the primary things that the people I work with for like mediumship development and stuff like that, I'm like, if you are stuck, the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do is, okay, what is your body doing right now? Like, what physical sensations exist, and develop them from there. Because before all else, that primary locus is one that we are, I suppose, understanding of, in that it is the easiest to be like, okay, instead of there is, such and such spirit with these qualities over in the corner of the room, until we work that muscle, the easiest thing is like, there was a sensation of a hand going across my back and a slight chill that like came through the room. It's like, all right, let's figure out what caused that. So really, in that same way, the proximity of spirits, the body is the vehicle for spirits.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to carry itself forward.
And we carry many spirits with us. I'm a huge believer in the plurality of souls and the plurality of self. And that's one of those things that really is important to me. Is there's contagion in every. We carried the traces of the people that we met in school, right? We carry some of the voices and pieces of, like, I still remember Like in grade school, like this one particular meal that was shared with me by just one friend, or like the pet that I still am cursed to remember the locker room, combinations of all my, adjacent locks near me in high school and so on. But like we also carry traces of the spirits that we might have brushed past with, consciously or unconsciously. We may never meet them again. But memory in the spirit world, I think, is not linear, and it's not so temporally bound to the past. It can be externalized into presence, and it can be instantiated into the present through theurgy, through thaumaturgy, through all these different techniques. Certainly through astrology, which is its own necromancy of a particular time and moment. And I think it calls on those spirits. It's one of those things too of once I feel like I've grasped something that might have happened, I'm able to kind of pull those spirits forward through scrying and through different kinds of auguries and conjurations to be like, let me look at this snapshot and see if I can use the affect of the moment to call on the spirits that were there, and see if I can actually speak to them now as someone who's much more consciously aligned. Which I don't know. To me, I've always kind of seen that as a metaphor in some way for horror, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, looking retrospectively at astrological charts is one of the biggest values, because I think it's a lot of how we learn the language of astrology and what it means for us specifically. How did these certain aspects or planetary energies show up for us specifically in these current moments, with who was around us, with the spirits we were in contact with or working with that day? And I found that retrospective moment is sometimes undervalued. We like to look at astrology in a forward-looking way and try to plan things out and optimize for time, perfect times as astrologers. But I think it's also looking backward to that moment to try to understand them and what were those conditions that impacted the way things are. Often when I'm scrying something and I'm having a hard time seeing it, if I close my eyes and try to recall the memory of what I was seeing in that moment, I'll get a clear view of the image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I suppose when it comes to planetary work, what are if someone were like, okay, I'm really excited about this stuff, I see the virtue of it, it's not something I've explored hugely beyond certain conjurations here and there, like what do you feel like would be the first things to consider for starting a kind of planetary praxis that allows you not only to align with that planet's energies more purposefully, but also understand its kind of inherent native pact that it shares with you and its position of where it was in your chart?
I think the very first thing someone should do is go stand out under the stars, under the sky,
Yes.
and look for where those objects are.
Thank you.
Try to meet them where they are. We have the idea of them through astrological doctrine and through mythology, and all these things are real, are part of our experience of them. But I don't think anything can beat looking up at the stars and feeling what their light feels like upon us. And I never thought I would be an astrologer, but I did study astronomy for a little bit in college, and was always sort of obsessed with the mystery of the stars and the heavens, and thought it was the most beautiful and potentiated thing that we could observe in the natural world. And I do feel like just by knowing the constellations and tracking where things were in the sky, I sort of got a feel for what these planets were like, and being able to see, oh yeah, Mars really does have a reddish hue, and you look up at it, and knowing what that red looks like to you is so much more powerful than just knowing, okay, Mars is red, right? That specific hue of red, and being able to recall that, I feel like, is a huge part of why I'm able to pull Mars up and be in conversation. After that, I would say start with the moon. I think the moon is really the intercessor between Earth and the heavens, and just even tracking, okay, is the moon waxing or waning right now? And just trying to take notice of what that speaks to in your life. There's a lot of magical things I just won't do on a waning moon. There's a lot of things I will do, but it's a very specific energy, and it is sort of the lens that all the rest of the planets in my experience kind of go through. After that, planetary days and planetary hours. I really like to look at the chart ruler first, who is the ruler of the sign that the ascendant is in, and focus on that planet's day. If it's Mars on Tuesdays, get a little app that tells you when Mars hour is, and just start by, even noticing what you feel like in that hour or what's happening in your life. And you can look up martial archetypes and kind of cross-reference them and really try to define those patterns. I think really trying to pull the idea of astrology, ideals of astrology, into the real world, how we're moving through it and what we surround ourselves with. I think one of the things that helped me the most was wearing planetary colors for a couple of years.
Ooh.
And I still do. I try to have something on me that pulls up the planetary color, because when I see it, it reminds me of whose day it is and what that means and where I should be looking to sort of attribute things that are happening to different spirits.
Mm-hmm. There's a set of planetary cufflinks that a friend of mine would exchange.
That's so cool.
Depending on the day, because it's so subtle, and people tend not to notice it. But it was such a fun way to be like, "Yep, it's the Mars day. I'm wearing my Mars cufflinks."
Yeah, I'm starting to experiment with different astrological candles, of really capturing, Mars day and Mars hour in a Mars candle, and just seeing how that can bring that energy into non-Mars day when I have to do Mars work, or sort of accentuate different Mars day things. And as I've played with different colors and herbs and materia, and found that some of them are kind of specific to my relationship with Mars. And so I think everyone kind of also needs to go through this relational process of figuring out, who is Mars to you, and how are you able to use that relationship to accomplish what you want to accomplish magically, astrologically.
So when are you guys going to join me in the work of stellar bread? We talked about that in the folklore like of bread magic episode, because something that comes up with that very strongly is capturing water in particular starlight.
Yeah.
Like when certain stars are visible. We gave the example of in Jerusalem, like when the Star of Bethlehem is visible, for example, and like capturing the water of like the most illuminating stars there in a particular well where it was said to be drawn, and then that is used to make the yeast rise. And so one of the things about like when the notion of like yeast rising is, yes, the body of Jesus being resurrected. Yes, it is literally matter becoming formed. And it's also the water is what becomes the fluid container for the star, which doesn't see light. But once it's in the yeast that actually can be exposed to like the darkness of the furnace or the darkness of the oven, and that becomes the kind of creation, that the kind of creation myth, right, of like the tempering of the world and its division and so on, and its explosion as well through like light. And so then the bread itself becomes the embodiment of that star's light, which you can then use for amulets. Like when I do stellar work, I often have a piece of bread that is made after that star there. I had to confirm with my own eyes. I had to actually witness it. I had its heliacal rise in the morning, and I had to actually make sure that I captured at some point. That will help me create that body, and that can get doctored with different herbs and different like seasonings and so on, and that can certainly have different animal and mineral and vegetable parts added to it. But the core of it is this kind of, I've caught you and you're rising now, like you're literally rising in the bread in the way that I saw you rise above the horizon.
The idea of capturing light and matter becoming form is related to sort of like the adding of breath or inspiration that the stars can bring forth. It's a beautiful poetics to it.
Yeah. Well, as we wind down, anything else you want to touch on? Possible, like I think we covered quite a bit, right? Scrying, relationships with planetary spirits, the asteroids and the outer planets. We've definitely talked a lot about Saturn. Anything else you want to share, or something you want to pick our brains on in this moment?
Yeah, I guess just as non-astrologers, I'm curious, like, what steps do y'all go through, and how much do the current astrological conditions and weather kind of play into what you do? I'm working with more people these days on finding those elections for them, and really diving into the poetics and even theatrics of what that might look like or entail. Yeah, just curious, like, what are the considerations that y'all take?
Well, I think for me, I because I benefit from astrology friends, like I will sometimes just get them to check. Like I will, that is just a piece of information I like to know. Inquiring minds to be knowing and wanting to know. So I will have people run charts for sure. I will also have people do elections at times. Like I also Maria, our mutual good friend, is someone who I look to for the non like literal planetary side of things. The zodiacal animals is something that I look into. You mentioned like you mentioned how the ascendant is really what people identify with in Hellenistic, but like for her, she's like everyone knows their like year animal, like whether you're like I don't know, like a rat or a pig or something like that, but like it's actually your day master. It's the most important in many ways, and accompanied by the element, and also its relation, its yin and yang coefficients. So for me, like I will look at that data, but when in terms of without it, like if I'm going without, it will be it's interesting because I have a very agglutinating like kind of interest in magic. So like if I can look at the lunar mansion, I will. If I can, which I can on my phone, if I want to look at the planetary hours and stuff like that, I will. I'll look. I know the basics of astrology to be able to like take a quick look at a chart and be like, okay, this is what's going on. But I don't. It's not something I've like learned to read extensively, and as a result, what I look at is physical location, like what can I see with the naked eye, which isn't always easy when you live in a city. So I will use an app sometimes. I could like the ones like that can just show you what the night sky actually is. But really beyond that, I'm going to really like what I'm really going to be focusing on is what do I see? What are in my tradition, what are the actual omens? So like what are the birds in the sky when I'm looking for that planet? What am I hearing in nature when I make that prayer? What lifts in my soul when I'm doing that? So it's very omen based, and it's a physical sight of the stellar body. Omens when I'm actually doing that. If I'm capturing something like in bread or in water, that kind of thing, that'll become its own process. If I'm capturing it in silver coins, for example, that'll be its own process. What kind of water am I capturing in? What kind of umbilical fluid am I using? How do I make the cord? There's all kinds of Serbian folk magic things for making umbilical cords for things using other kinds of materia. What spirit am I asking to gaze with me? Like who is watching with me? Who is seeing things that I'm not seeing? And also, who is encouraging me to use what extra information? I don't want to overload by being like, I have to know the hygromantia day as well, and I have to know all this other stuff. Like it can get too much. Some of my spirits are like that, but others are going to be like, one candle, one glass of water, one sincere prayer, and what happens. And so because my court kind of like oscillates between the two modalities of like we like to overcomplexify and we also like to pare it down and be like, wait, what is the raw spirit power here? The last thing for me and the most essential one, and that's why I'm naming it last, is relationship. So what is my history and relationship with that stellar body? What is the pain in my body that I feel when I look at it? Like, what is the sensation? What was the memory of when I first saw it or when I last remember seeing it? That clearly. Where was I hiking? Who was I talking to? And what are the animal allies, the vegetal allies, the mineral allies that I have that I associate with that because of, yes, the star traditionally, let's say, patrons this particular grain, but when I first saw it and had that experience of realizing its sympathy in me is when I was standing next to this particular kind of plant. And so that's my plant for that star. So really, as a witch, relationship will always trump everything else. It will be when I felt it. It'll be like when I received a secret name for it, for my spirits. That only works when I use it. I can't pass it on to you. It wouldn't work. You have to develop your own. And it'll be just as potent and powerful as mine for you. So that I guess is kind of my answer. So essentially, yes, and I will totally consult astrologer friends. And like one day when I have time, I will sit down and I will do a course and I will figure it out. Like I'm just gonna teach it myself in some way. Or I'll get like a group going and be like, hey, all an astrologer, witches, let's just get together and learn this over a semester. Because that's how I do other things. That's how I push friends to learn languages and other kinds of things. But like, let's just get our vocab down. But also I will rely on that, and I've been on the internet once or twice, so I will go on Lunarium or Astro.com and check things out, and my bootleg Solar Fire, but I will, but to me it's the relationship first, and everything else builds from that, including when that spirit is just like agglutinate, go for it, add more things, but know what the core message and why you're doing this. Like if I know the intention, I can move laterally, hopefully.
Well, yeah. And for me, it's really in the same vein of like primary considerations of what mood are my spirits in that day. Especially like the familiars that have been gained through planetary workings, planetary evocations of angels, archangels, intelligences, daimons of the different spheres. So my go-to as kind of a bypass to having to open up a chart and then my brain starts sparking like Patrick's, because I know even less astrology stuff than any of us. I'm kind of just like, are you guys good? And if they're like, yeah, I'm like, all right, we're doing this shit. Other primary considerations include I go outside. If it's cloudy, I'm like, all right, I'm doing weather magic first.
Yes, part them clouds. That's right, Key. I taught you well.
That you did. So I'm like, if it's cloudy, I'm gonna make the clouds go away. Refresh and make sure the spiritual ecosystem around me is taken care of. And then really it comes down to building an environment for that energy to thrive, or a container for that to be. A lot of the way that I look at these things is like containers or lenses. And I'm like, all right, if I'm doing this, let's say I'm doing a Jupiterian working for money or whatever, better business. I'm like, all right, everything, the lens that I'm now manipulating this magic through has a blue tint to it, in a bit of a pun way, but also quite literally sometimes, where I'm acting on the material until it starts to hum in the way that I know Jupiter to hum. It's like that balancing of that, the harmonics and building and layering correspondence until I'm like, fucking election, the energy's right here,
Exactly.
And it's a bit blasé, but there's no but. It's just a bit blasé. It's just kind of the way that I work, and like I think a lot, not to elect the episode even further than it already is, but posting about experiments with planetary pentacles, where I'm like, this is me blending them together, merging it, and like doing it on the floor as like chalk, circle, and candles talking to the spirits, because ultimately, to someone who's just looking at it, it's a bunch of pentagrams and hexagrams and Jupiterian kameas and like squiggly lines. But if you're digging into the language that's being spoken with the spirits, it's like, oh, we understand pictorially where we fit into this diagram and how we're supposed to work with each other, and now we can do this thing.
Well said.
Because I think one of the funny things is like, to the extent that I've done by the book Astrological Magic, it's often the more like version, which is just put the moon on the ascendant with the thing and make sure none of them are too particularly debilitated. And then just kind of wing it from there. And then a lot of the enchanting for enchanting modality comes in, where I'm like, oh, damn, this talisman, like scrying it, is suddenly really deficient in the martial drive and oomph to get this ball of energy rolling in a particular path. Then I'm going to go outside, grab a bunch of nettles and other martial plants, and just start whipping the talisman until it does its job,
No comment. Continue.
But yeah, I like to balance things out and just do that balancing with a little oomph.
A little oomph.
Might you say a good whipping balances everyone out?
Oh. Someone had to say it.
The thing when when your only tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Oh, okay.
when your only tool is a whip.
The whole
It
world
have
is
something to do with your Mars, huh?
Talismans start to look very naughty.
not Key's Mars and Scorpio. Remarkable. But you know what? I do buy your argument otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And I love who doesn't love Nettle?
Friend of Nettle.
I'm a friend of Nettle too.
Yeah.
I think we all love that good iron supplement. No, but I like that too. It's just like, what are you how does the planet become the techne?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I foresee collaborations in the future that are not podcast related.
Yeah.
And not that we have anything planned, not that we even have an idea of the scope, but I want to put it out there in this very moment, speaking of elections. And our whole Aphrodite thing was not based at all in like, where was Venus, right? It was based on, well, there she is, like literally in front of us. And I think that it's I think that kind of cultivation practice, if you will, with the planets can lend itself to those kinds of experiences very much, because it's not about you, actually, it's about everything that's happening in that moment.
As below, so above.
As below, so above. And as our good friend Cadmus, who we hope to have on the podcast sometime soon as well, articulates, remember that the gods have personalities. They're not nebulous energy forces, right? So like and Aphrodite, she is mischievous. I mean, really talk about tearing the known world in half because of just like, well, these guys would go well together. Good old
Especially when
Troy
she's in her fall, like right now. So,
hi, lady. Yeah, she'll be back. She's always here. Actually, she's just having a little topsy-turvy time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on, Jove. You are, as always, just one of the most delightful people to talk to about any and all of these subjects, and much beyond them. So let's I mean, people, you mentioned they can see you at spooky.com, on Instagram, hodypartner.com. We'll have all the links in the usual places. But if there's anything else you want to plug, or something that you want to kind of hint at or tease, so you mentioned some candles might be forthcoming.
Yeah. Still, experimenting with those, and need to send both of y'all some test candles for sure. But with Hody Partner, I think I've got a little sort of treat, a surprise, if you will, for the Frightful Howls listeners.
Oh yeah. So go check that out.
Yeah. hodypartner.com/frightful howls.
Mm-hmm.
Get a little extra offering action. that really is, I think, emblematic of not only our brand but also our friendship.
Truly.
Yeah. So check that out. Time of airing.
Yeah. Go check it out, because we're not going to tell you. And I love a good curiosity.
And this is definitely a key flavored curiosity.
It is more key flavored than anything else. You can literally taste the Arctic blue Celsius.
Yeah,
fizzling
blue
in the
flavored for sure.
It's 100% blue flavored. The planetary attributions of blue raspberry.
Oh god.
That's the next episode.
Well, we'll be back, and I'm sure many more podcast appearances to come. But I really want us to do a little collab of some kind of thing we can offer, whether as digital or as physical items. Who knows what the tariff situation will hold for us in the future. But I would love to just kind of hang out and do some kind of experiments. And for those of you who've been asking us, wait, if Salzburgs are closed, where can I get my chart read? It's Jove. And all of our friends who are amazing astrologers, Sasha Ravitch, J.M. Hamad. We have so many friends who are really good. I mean, Gray Crawford and is wonderful work, especially and our good friend Vanessa Irena, who does Sword and Scythe, and Jeannie of Tides of Tethys, Gray's partner. There are the world is full of amazing astrologers. We can hardly name them all. I want to just note, because I had a Saturn return reading from Jove recently, hugely helpful in structuring so much of what I've been going through and what I've been processing on the magical level, on the emotional level, on really every level, and help plan out the next few years in ways where I feel really good about where we're going, and have some better tools on what to handle. So consider getting one, if whether it's a particular return, or whether it's just a natal reading in general, or whether it's just like an interesting, if there's a particular subsection of your chart that you really want to analyze, including certain kinds of planets. I mean, Jove is your astromage for sure.
Oh, thank you, Sfinga.
Of course.
Thank you so much, both of you, for having me on. This is a long time coming, and so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Akashic Records. My Spotify is always I check Jove's constantly, and I'm like, oh, what are new music that I'm learning? It's great. So you turned me on to this one. It's none other than The Sky Kisses by Kedar Livansky. One of my all-time favorites now.
Same.
It literally is kisses to the brain.
Truly.
Oh yeah.
Blow the planets a kiss during their hour.
Go outside and blow them a kiss directly, lest they kiss you back.
Yeah, especially Venus.
And my Akashic record for this one is Eli Brown's classic Escape from Planet Monday.
I nearly went into the hole, like fully into the abyss, listening to this at a Marcus Schultz set.
Fucking Marcus.
he put this on, and I almost sank into the abyss.
As he does.
As he does. Unicorn Slayer.
The unicorn was slayed on that night a couple different times.
Yeah. Like my body folds into its own like Z axis, so just disappears. Yeah.
Turn into an origami creature.
Well, my Akashic record is Star Key by Amika, which I believe she made while doing some astrological ritual. So it's a fun one to check out.
And you can feel it.
Oh yeah.
I have zoned out to this track so many times, just making like fourth wall breaking eye contact with nothing in particular.
It's a great one to go outside and look at the stars while listening to, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, Key, speaking of stars and keys, what's our license set apart for this time?
Yeah, our license to depart is a classic. Orphic number 83, Testia.
You know her, you love her. Give it to us.
Perfect timing. She's right on the part of fortune right now.
Asteroid Hestia. Woo! This was all planned.
Dude, timed it out to the minute. That's right, Astro Mages. If you want precision to that amount, go check out Jove. This has been the most elaborate advertisement of all time.
If you want precision, and you also want if you want that sweet beautiful coincidence agglutinating magic of just when you mentioned when all you have is a whip, when all you have is a point and click browser game, everything is a clue. And that's my take on Jove Scrying.
Oh man,
I'll take it.
Oh yeah.
Start to wonder what the right click does.
Expect element.
Yeah, exactly. Properties.
Yeah. Oh my god.
View source.
No, please don't view source. I need to listen to more Star Key for that one.
The daughter of Saturn, venerable dame, the seat containing of unwearied flame, in sacred rites these ministers are thine, mystics much blessed, holy and divine. In thee the gods have fixed place, strong, stable, basis of the mortal race. Eternal, much formed, ever florid queen, laughing and blessed, of lovely mien. Accept these rites, accord each just desire, and gentle health and needful good inspire.